this presentation will give you an overview of career theory. The learning here is to support the unit Theory and Practice of Career Guidance and Development. The learning outcomes are that by the end of the session, you'll be able to differentiate between different categories of career theory, describe the links between career theory and the historical and social context, and explain the implications of career theory for developing programs of career development. Let's start with thinking about what actually a theory is. So Law told us in 1996 that theory offers descriptors of what happens, explanations suggesting why they happen in the way they do, and predictions anticipating what can happen and in what conditions. Essentially, a theory helps us to make sense of the world. So how has theory developed? Well, through a series of processes, including empirical observations, including of one's own experiences, gathering evidence, common sense, deductions, knowledge of published work, testing and redevelopment. In terms of career guidance and occupational choice theory, theories have developed over a period of time to explain why, in the theorist's view, when and how and why people make choices about work and training. They give understanding and a framework for practitioners to make effective interventions in order to support vocational decision-making. This slide shows a chronological order of the development of theory. And from this slide, you can see that in the early 1900s, there were trait and factor theories which developed. Firstly, from the father of career development theory, Frank Parsons, and then through John Holland. In the 1950s, theory developed further, and we tend to call the theories around the 1950s developmental theories, people like Ginsberg and Super. In the 1960s, social career theories began to develop from people like Rogers and Law. And social learning theories in the 1970s, Krumboltz, Rogers and Law. In the 1990s, some additional theories emerged, things like planned happenstance and systems theory. And then finally, in the 2000s, narrative theory. Somebody like Mark Savickas is a proponent of this. And what you can see here is that the theories are linked to some extent on social and historical contexts. So in the early 1900s, there was a need to match people to an increasing range of jobs, and so the matching style of career guidance began to develop. But in the 1950s, there was a growing awareness of the way people evolved, particularly after the war, and people were seen as individuals whose needs changed throughout the lifespan. In the 1960s, there was a kind of response to the kind of social environment at the time, and theories became more sort of client-centred or individually centred rather than centred around the economy. And you can see that in the 70s and 90s and 2000s, there was a general move towards kind of more psychodynamic theories, individual focused theories, etc., to try and help explain why people made the decisions that they did. Very recently, work by Robiero in 2021 has shone a light on the influence and impact that the global north has had on the development of career theory. Ribeiro notes that it is important for people in the global south to recognise that theory needs to be developed or addressed with context in mind. And so it's possible to have a look around and see some emerging examples. Here are a few. So in New Zealand, the Maori culture has influence through the Te Ware Tapawa approach. So this is explained by the fact that Maori health is underpinned by 4 dimensions, representing the basic beliefs of life, psychological health, spiritual health, physical health, and family health. These 4 dimensions are represented by the 4 walls of a house, and each wall is necessary to the strength and the symmetry of the building. Of particular importance to career choice is the last. The beliefs, expectations, or opinions of the family can have a major impact on career choice, the choices that an individual makes. Traditional Chinese values play an important role in career choice. These are particularly around such things as interpersonal relatedness, family orientation, and the sacrifice of self to contribute to the group. In Indonesia, family is the basis of life, and in this way everyone is connected to each other. A Semar puppet is used to represent wisdom and the role of a parent. Thus, a career practitioner using the puppet is seen as someone who can help navigate the difficulties and challenges of life. In all of these examples, context matters, and it is important that practitioners understand this as they apply theory to practice. So for the purposes of this course, there are 3 main ways that theory is understood, and these are theories of process, theories of content, and theories of process and content. Theories of process relate to the interaction and change over time, and this can be characterised by theories in which there are a series of stages through which people pass. In some literature, these are also referred to as developmental theories. An example of this type of theory is Super's lifespan, life space, or those theories produced by Gottfredson and Ginsberg. Theories of content relate to the characteristics of the individual and the context they live in. The influences on career development are thought to be either intrinsic to the individual or originate from the context in which the individual lives. An example of this type of theory are Parsons and Holland's trait and factor, Borden's psychodynamic model of choice, or Brown's value-based theory. Theories of content and process. These have been formed in response to a need for theory to take into account both of these key areas. These theories encompass both the characteristics of individuals and their context, and the development and interaction between them. Examples of this group of theories are Krumboldt's social learning theory of career counselling, happenstance approach theory, social cognitive career theory, and Rose theory of personality. We also tend to look at theory through the lens of career constructivism. The theory of constructivism has its roots in philosophy, science, psychology, sociology, and anthropology. The core of the theory involves the idea that reality is relative rather than absolute, and that people actively create reality by the way in which they experience and interpret events. People use personal constructs or theories that they've created about life to organise and account for their experiences and associate meaning through decisions and actions. Individuals use these constructs to evaluate themselves and others and to make judgments about the world and to predict the future. As active agents in their lives, people refine their constructs over time based on their life experiences and their reactions to and processing of those experiences. Examples of theories in this group are systems theory framework, career construction theory, chaos theory, positivist career theory, ecological theory, and career narrative theory. In future sessions, we will examine these theories in more detail. In each of the sessions, you'll be provided with reading materials to deepen your learning, but on this point, you might wish to read Rubiero's paper on theories from the Global South, which is provided for you in course resources, as this should have an impact on the way that you begin to think about theory. There are 2 slides full of references. I have referred to a number of different theories throughout this presentation, but we will go back to all of these at a later date and examine them in more detail.